Bitcoin is a solution that's helpful to every person, every corporation, every government, every agency. I think it's just a constructive, useful thing. It's thermodynamically sound economic energy. So it's a well-engineered economic network. And that being the case, there are very few people in the world that want to destroy their economy actively. Maybe the pure communists that are totally against property rights, but most people are trying to actually improve their economic circumstance. So the ones that understand that embrace Bitcoin, and the ones that don't understand Bitcoin may be skeptical of it.
Michael Saylor is the co-founder, chairman, and CEO of MicroStrategy Incorporated, a prominent business intelligence company. During a recent interview, Michael Saylor explains the future of Bitcoin and addresses some common concerns surrounding it. The main question on many investors' minds is whether Bitcoin will be banned, hacked, or copied, given its significant growth as the largest crypto asset 3 years ago. Bitcoin has gained recognition as a legitimate digital commodity by major media outlets and influential entities, including Bloomberg, the New York Times, CNBC, and regulatory bodies like the SEC and CFTC. Skeptics who predicted a ban on Bitcoin have lost influence as heads of regulatory bodies, and figures like Jerome Powell view it as a valuable part of the financial landscape. In May, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. became the first presidential candidate to accept Bitcoin campaign donations. He refers to Bitcoin as an exercise in democracy and is a strong defender in the crypto digital assets industry. In the U.S., up till now, 4 presidential candidates have announced that they will accept Bitcoin donations for their campaigns, including Vivek Ramaswamy, Ron DeSantis, Patrick Nelson. These candidates believe that Bitcoin could help to reduce the influence of big money in politics. With only a fraction of the $500 trillion of liquid financial assets invested in Bitcoin currently, even a small increase to 1 or 2% could result in a substantial surge, potentially multiplying the value by tenfold or more. Saylor made an interesting comparison, suggesting that if Bitcoin is considered digital gold, there is no nation of gold with the power to subpoena individuals for diminishing its monetary premium. According to Saylor, Bitcoin is emerging as a digital property network that fulfills the purpose of being a store of value. We will now bring you clips of Michael Saylor with the block. Before we proceed further in this video, please make sure to subscribe our channel and click the bell icon to stay updated.
The question is Bitcoin going to be banned, hacked, or copied? Right? It was the biggest crypto asset 3 years ago, but will it be banned? Will it be hacked? Will it be copied? That's the question for any investor. What happens next? There used to be a lot of Bitcoin skeptics. There were, people, well, there were the deniers. I talk about them, people that think Bitcoin is tulip bulbs and a Ponzi scheme. Peter Schiff being the most famous. The deniers are pretty much silenced now, right? I mean, they have fallen out of consensus. Bloomberg, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, CNBC, Congress, the SEC, the CFTC, the Treasury, all the central banks of the world, they all kind of acknowledge it's not tulip bulbs. It's a real asset. It's a digital commodity. So the deniers are out of the mainstream. Then you have the skeptics, like Bitcoin is really a good idea, but it's too good idea, so the government's going to ban it. And we had, Jamie Dimon said it, you've got other people that said it, Larry Fink once said, it's an index of money laundering. So the skeptics held the day for a while. But I think in the last 24 to 36 months, the skeptics have kind of fallen out of the mainstream as well, because you can't with a straight face go on CNBC and say Bitcoin's going to be banned when they've got the ticker in the lower right corner, and they've got the head of the SEC, the head of the CFTC, and the Secretary of the Treasury, and then Jerome Powell all saying, I think it's going to be around for a while. It's a real thing. So the skeptics don't really have much power. So now if it's an asset, you've got a bunch of investors, and maybe you love it, maybe you hate it. You're like, if you're an investor, you acknowledge it as an asset class, and you can either go long, go short, or trade the volatility. I think that you've seen a lot more investors coming into this space, and for a while they thought it was correlated to risk assets, and so they would short it to hedge their risk portfolio, right? And then they thought it was not correlated or negatively correlated, and so that view has evolved over time. But to your point, the best thing that could happen to Bitcoin is the volatility decreases a bit. but the correlations break down, because if it's an uncorrelated asset and it's a legitimate asset, then most of the financial world is underexposed, right? You've got $500 trillion of liquid financial assets floating around, and 0.1% of that is Bitcoin. So if it gets to be 1%, right, 2%, then it's going up by a factor of 10 or more. So digital currency networks are very controversial, and there's a lot of uncertainty. But on the other hand, owning property is not controversial. And if Bitcoin is digital gold, then there is no nation of gold with subpoena power that's going to attack you for taking away its monetary premium. And the same is true if Bitcoin is better investment than real estate. Well, Congress and the Treasury and the FBI and FinCEN, they're not going to take a lot of issue with the fact that you actually demonetize some commercial real estate by 2%. So Bitcoin is emerging as this digital property network, and it meets the use case of store of value. And all of the endorsements have made a huge difference. I mean, you got 4 presidential candidates that have come out pro-Bitcoin. That's kind of like a chicken in every pot.
Just a few days after BlackRock filed an application to launch the first spot Bitcoin ETF in the US, a newcomer called EDX has arrived in the crypto exchange market. Fully named EDX Markets, the crypto exchange is supported by some of the most powerful Wall Street firms. During the interview, Saylor also touched on the denial of 20 spot ETFs by the SEC and the significance of the announcement of the EDX exchange. According to Saylor, the rationality of decision-making in the crypto industry, as companies likely waited to file for a spot ETF until there were signs of a non-custodial exchange, meeting regulatory requirements set by the SEC. Saylor points out that currently there is only one major ETF available for Bitcoin, namely BETO. This implies that despite Bitcoin's 81% year-to-date performance, institutional investors have limited options for exposure to the asset. Saylor suggests that the odds of approval improve from unlikely to more favorable, leading other companies to refile their applications based on BlackRock's move and the upcoming launch of EDX. As for the 4 milestones that will drive mainstream adoption of Bitcoin, he explains the availability of a spot ETF, the recognition of Bitcoin as an asset class, the normalization of accounting through fair value accounting, and the Bitcoin halving.
I do think people make rational decisions. For example, if I was BlackRock and I was looking at all the spot ETF denials, the SEC has said, we're not going to approve one because we want an exchange which is non-custodial, that agrees to a surveillance agreement, that's a regulated exchange. I probably would have said there's no point in filing a spot ETF until it looks like there might be one of those. So maybe it took 11 months for EDX to come out, and then EDX was going live, and they said, okay, well, EDX is going to go live sometime soon, so I guess we'll file our application, because the odds just went from 90% against us to 50-50 or 75% in favor. And if you put that together with all the political pressure on the SEC right now to approve a spot ETF, which is built over the past 6 months, right? And you could imagine maybe they thought the odds had switched, and then of course the next 4 companies that file for a spot ETF or refiled, they obviously looked at EDX, they looked at BlackRock, and they said, well, if BlackRock thinks they're going to file, and if EDX is coming online, then it makes sense for us to get back in the queue. So I think people act rationally based upon the information at hand, but ultimately I think there's a lot of independent parties that are all going at their own speed, and sometimes it takes them the government takes a year, 2, 3 years to do some things, and so I don't think anything is that easy and that coordinated. I think you would like for all this stuff to be worked out over the course of weeks or months or days, but generally it feels like sometimes it takes a year, 2, 3, 4 years for something to happen, which was pretty obvious 36 months ago. It's a milestone on the road to institutional adoption of Bitcoin. So I think it's important. Like, I don't think it drives Bitcoin to $5 million a coin overnight. Like some people hype it to be super, super important. I think it's important. It's one of probably 6 or 7 things that are milestones. The significance is big institutional investors want clarity, and they want to know that the asset is a legitimate asset. And so a spot ETF sends a message that it's a legitimate asset. The second thing is many of them have to buy securities. They can't buy commodities. So there are trillions and trillions of dollars that are in these institutions, pension funds and institutional investors, where they can buy securities, but they cannot buy commodities. And so they couldn't buy Bitcoin even if they wanted to buy the Bitcoin. It's either for charter reasons, like I raised $10 billion from a pension fund and I promised them I would only invest in securities that trade on national exchanges, or sometimes it's tax reasons. There are tax requirements. So now I start looking for a security, and if I want to buy Bitcoin, I want something that looks like the asset. Technically, one of the interesting things going on right now is if you look year to date at the performance of Bitcoin, it's up 81%. But there's only one ETF. I mean, there's one major ETF I can use to buy it. That's BITO.
Looking ahead, the launch of EDX markets and the increasing interest in spot ETFs for Bitcoin signal a growing acceptance of cryptocurrencies in the mainstream financial landscape. These developments, along with the recognition of Bitcoin as a legitimate asset class, pave the way for further institutional adoption. Saylor possesses a bullish outlook for Bitcoin, stating that Wall Street and the general community are internalizing these milestones. He predicts that these developments will drive mainstream adoption of Bitcoin and potentially send its value to $1 million. How do you see the future of Bitcoin in the context of increasing institutional adoption and regulatory developments? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. If you find this video informative, don't forget to show your support towards our channel by giving this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to stay informed about our latest videos covering more interesting topics. Thank you for watching.